many days, so we have 5 more days after that.
We're live, yay!
Ronnie knows how it works.
There we go.
Yep, I had 2 kids through the system, yes.
Okay. So the 15th is the last day of school. We just have to add on to that, right?
Right, so yeah, we're now at the 16th.
Trying to avoid that. You can do the, you could be the hero, because I remember when Al was here in his first year, he was ridiculed roundly for calling off school preemptively. Hey, Carl.
How are you?
Hey, Carl.
Ridiculed roundly the night before school. He called it off, and then in the morning it was like barely a rainstorm.
Yeah.
It was like, yeah, there was nothing. I mean, it was like, and it was like 35 degrees,
Right,
and the entire school district was shut down. And so then the next time we got hit with a snowstorm, he did early dismissal, whereas most of the other districts did 2 days off. We went
Holy
to school,
cow.
we went to
2
school,
days.
we went to school until 11, and we bused the kids home just as the snow was starting. It snowed all day, all night, and then into the next morning, but by the morning they had the streets cleared, so we did a late start at 11, so the kids actually got credit for 2 days, for 2 days. And most of the other districts, as a matter of fact, I think all of them canceled for 2 days straight. So. What's up?
Hey.
Right. Good to see you.
Hey, what's going on?
hi, good to see you.
Still waiting, it's been 4:58.
Yeah, we did.
Nope. Nope. He is,
The TFP crowd is doing a baseball thing at Nichols, is that right now?
yeah, no, he's doing,
Too old.
his football, we're doing the spring camp for football. So that's 10 weeks, 2 hours every Saturday. And then I've got him on my own home workout program.
Oh, nice.
So I was kind of wanting to do baseball, but he wasn't really that into it. And,
So you don't do the TFP anymore?
No, he was,
Number of years into
he
all of this.
yes, you do. He's just a kid. He's just, you know, trying to find his way, but it wasn't really what he was looking for, so. Okay, whatever. If it, you know, maybe someday he'll go back to it.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I don't think it was anything specific other than just,
Yeah.
you know, just a little bit more, needs a little bit
Hmm?
more social, a little more social engagement.
Yeah.
Loves
What time are you supposed
Yeah.
to
And
be?
the,
Supposed to be there about 6:05.
Nichols, see,
Yeah.
bench is 70.
You can sit early,
This,
or is it?
180
Doesn't
from
start
the.
till 7, does it?
No, ours.
Oh,
Oh, your board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I'd like to get going because I know we have another meeting that you guys are going to, so we'll end up ending this meeting at about 5:40. So I know you guys are gonna be there at like
6:05.
6:05, so.
Yeah, it's not even us. We have our regular
Yes.
advisory.
Yeah, you guys are already advisory, but you guys are meeting with
Select
select board.
board, yeah.
All right, good. So, call meeting to order. This is the Technology, Finance, and Operations Subcommittee. It is Monday, March 13th. It's 5 p.m. Could we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. First up, we have the minutes to the 2/27 meeting. Can I have a motion to approve those?
So moved.
I will second that. Do you have any discussion, changes, minutes, alterations? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Next, I'm gonna turn it over to Aaron, budget roundtable recap. We can all kind of just talk about that, but I'll let Aaron just start.
Yeah. So, we walked, most of you were there. Carol, you weren't, you were there?
The second
The budget
roundtable?
roundtable.
No, I
Yeah, I
wasn't,
wasn't there.
no.
Okay, yeah, there weren't that many people from Hamden.
Yeah, Doug was there and Sandra.
So we're continuing to, I mean, long story short, we're continuing to work on the budget, pick away at things. As of that meeting, we were at about 4.5%. John and I have since been in conversation with LP Beck. They've given us some options to reduce our transportation costs through going to 3 tiers. Which will, change our start times a little bit, but we can save about 200,000, maybe a little bit more, but we're starting with a baseline of 200,000. That would reduce 5 buses. You know, they're pretty much saying, you know, there's still a lot of fixed costs built into the system, but per bus is roughly $40,000 savings if we reduce. So we're working that into the budget. We'll have the budget again ready to present
Thursday.
on Thursday. Yeah. We will, you know, see where things go from there and what other options present themselves in the next 3 days.
I was a little disappointed. I thought the first meeting we had a very nice turnout for representative for our delegation, and then this time around, Sherry Spix was the only one who was there. It was really disappointing, especially as we get into the meat of the budget, when we're going to start looking at, you know, how things are affecting us and how, you know, how small changes in the state's reimbursement can have large consequences in a regional district. We're just talking about the roundtable. Mark, I don't know, welcome. Mark, I didn't know if you had anything that you wanted to add. I mean, I think in the summertime we should think about the format of those and maybe switch it up a little bit and talk about doing, like we had said, more of a state of the schools in the fall, and then in the spring, or then the winter, like January, February, have more of just kind of an intensive working group.
Or even, yeah, oh yeah, right, so we can.
Yeah, I didn't know if I had anything specific that I.
No, I mean, we covered the broad range of topics. The big things, you know, were again, I mean, we were looking at the 14% increase on the special education costs.
I'm getting lower.
There should be a little on the outside, yeah.
No, there's a couple of chairs.
Maybe it's some of
it's
not working.
Oh, the
loser chair.
He's shrinking.
I'm sorry. We'll add some new chairs to the budget.
So, I mean, there was, all in all, again, I mean, I think one of the things that we really have to work at is trying to find ways to lure or attract our legislative delegation to these meetings, because it really is telling when they don't show up. It shows that we're not a priority, and I don't like to think that.
I think you would find it more constructive taking them into John's office and having a one-on-one with him.
Yes, if we could lure them in even for that.
I think that's a way more constructive way to.
Yeah, but I'm thinking in terms of being an elected official. I mean, showing up at a budget roundtable of two communities that you're the legislative representative for. I mean, that to me is, in terms of just visibility.
But you know what they're going to say at those meetings.
Yeah.
Publicly.
Oh, I know.
You're not going to get.
We're going to try.
They're going to say the same thing that you give on the news.
Yeah, we got a $3 billion surplus, but we can't
It's
fully
not a
fund
good
regional
working environment for
transportation.
Because we're fully funding the Student Opportunity Act.
Well, I think
Gotcha.
what happened is, it wasn't really clear what the difference was between the first one and the second one, so they probably, I was just there,
Yeah.
like a month and a half ago or whatever. And so I think
Yeah.
the agenda needs to be something that drives them there.
Yeah.
not just-
Well, I think was the last one. I mean, we had set up some follow-ups. I mean, we definitely had some follow-ups for them. It's just they weren't there, so we couldn't really follow through on the stuff that we wanted to with them. But we'll look at ways in which we can kind of reinvent how we do those. I do think it's constructive. I think we just have to continually think about how all of the town committees can connect. Because there's all too often what happens is that one committee doesn't know what the other is doing, and there's too much confusion. So hopefully it'll be, we can make it even better. But so any more questions on the roundtable? Mark, I told them we were going to end at like 5:40 because they got to be over to Hamden to do the budget with the select board. So. All right. So next, Aaron, you guys met with Hamden Advisory last week. I had a meeting. I wasn't able to be there, but John, you and Aaron went over there. So everything.
Sean was there.
John was there. Okay, good. Everything good over there. Everything went okay.
I think we got a good hearing. We got some feedback from the meeting that it was helpful for us to explain the costs that regional districts bear that municipals don't.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was somewhat educational for some.
Good. All right. So, and Carol, did you guys have any further questions after you guys met when they left? about the
No,
budget?
no, I think, you know, and I think that the explanations were what we anticipate every year, it's, you know, and I think just the drivers of what are the costs. I think the thing that was kind of missing, you know, at the end, we were a little rushed because we had other appointments, was, you know, if the communities can't come behind what you need, you know, what are the consequences of that? So we didn't get to those conversations, and I don't know how far along you guys are in terms of the what ifs, but that would be something, you know, that we're gonna need to know.
Yeah. We've had, if I can,
Go ahead.
we've had some initial conversations. Tomorrow at our district leadership team, we're gonna kind of have the rubber meet the road a little bit more, you know, where things might be if we can't. You know, at the end of the day, it's pink slips. I mean, you know, and that's what we do. It's just a matter of how many and where
Right,
those
and
come
what
from.
programs are affected by all of that, right?
I would hope it's more than pink slips. I would hope it's more than pink slips. I would hope it's more than pink slips. I think I speak for FinCom and say,
We had a pretty robust discussion
What does that mean, more than people?
more than just layoffs. If you're just gonna
Oh, yeah.
bury the teachers on it, then I just think, I mean, there has to be, you have a $50
No,
million
I
budget.
thought,
That's
I
where
didn't
almost
mention that.
all of our non-fixed costs are. I mean, we don't have, you know, of that 50 million,
We don't have
you
enough
know,
time to
more
have a
than
discussion.
6 million is health insurance, 3.5 million or more is transportation.
27 million salaries.
2.2 million is Hampden County retirement. You know, I can go down the list. You know, our special education costs, those are, you know, mandated services. You know, we've got millions in those, and then you figure salaries. Other than that, everything else is just, you know, picking through couch cushions. It really is. I mean, you know, we can find little bits here and
If you had
there,
to
but
estimate, how much of the budget would you say is discretionary?
I mean, I think it depends on what you mean by discretionary.
I think what he's looking at is, he would be looking at a percentage of the budget that is not mandated. So you have some control over, and
So I
that's,
suppose technically is everything above minimum local contribution.
Yeah.
Correct, I mean, that's a technical matter, that's discretionary.
Right, I mean, arguably, if you take your minimum contributions and play them out, I mean, we have a minimum, a little beyond that is minimum net school spending. I mean, that would be, you know, that would be cutting 14 million from the budget or so. That would be,
Well, I understand it's an artificial thing, but technically, that's discretionary money.
yeah.
I mean,
I think if you think about it in realistic terms, though, if you think about, you know, all of the things that we pay for in the district, and like I said, I mean, you can go through and you can look at the major drivers of our cost increases, and you just look at how much money that is. I mean, between teacher salaries, health insurance, retiree benefits, insurance, I mean, you're getting up 40+ million, right? So
Let me just throw out a couple things. I mean, let me just, and pure brainstorming. How about combining services with towns? How about outsourcing payroll? How about doing different things? And maybe it's too late to do that for this budget season. It seems to me that we just fall back in this every year, and it's the wrong approach. It's not working. Seems like there's other opportunities to do different things.
well, the first area, I think the biggest area where we have room to save an awful lot of money is building utilization. I mean,
Building utilization. I didn't
I
say
mean-
it because I thought that was an obvious one.
No, but well, yeah, so when I look at like payroll and stuff like that, I mean, there are some, you know, there's some advantages. I mean, certainly we can investigate that moving forward. You know, the biggest problem with outsourcing payroll is the HR part of it, right? So, you know, when somebody has a problem with their paycheck, they come to this office. If you're using, you know, Paychecks or check writers or a company like that, then they're actually having to phone the paycheck company themselves, which creates more of an onus on the, you know, on the employees within the district.
I don't need to, I'm not
Yeah.
here to discuss it necessarily
Yeah,
tonight.
no,
I just
no.
throw things
Right.
under an umbrella saying,
Yep.
combining services with the towns, maintenance facilities, maintenance people. I mean, there's things we can do collectively on a bigger scale think it's time we start thinking outside the box.
So, yeah, I think we've had those discussions.
We've been thinking outside the box for
Yeah.
7 years I've been.
I'm not
on
really
it.
sure,
Yeah.
so combining services,
Maintenance and town maintenance and town,
so.
So you guys would take on that cost of the people who maintain the
We
school?
would
Is that
share
what
the
you're saying?
cost, but I would think there might be, and again, I'm just throwing things out there. I'm just thinking, every year we talk about, we're gonna lay off teachers, we're gonna cut programming.
So I don't-
And that's what I'm hearing again.
But doesn't the
It's
town
bothersome.
have, but doesn't the
Yeah.
town have, the town has, I mean, they have their own janitorial services contract, right?
They
As
do.
as does the school districts.
we're trying to say, you know, what we
Yeah.
should or shouldn't do, but presumably there's some redundancy in there,
Right.
you know, between, say, the
Right.
town's maintenance folks and our maintenance folks, and your maintenance folks. and-
Drive through 4 towns and I watch the plows turn around at the town line, you know? The marks in the snow from them turning around at the
That's
town
horrific,
line. I always
yes.
wonder why we don't regionalize some of those services, right? It's just a huge waste of gas to do that.
Again, I'm not saying it's gonna solve all of our problems.
Sure. Yeah.
But I'm
Just
just looking for options.
Just to speak to some of those issues, I guess what I'd say is the main way of combining services with other districts is through the collaborative, which is something we do. So we coordinate on transportation, which is one of the big costs in our budget. We coordinate on special ed, which is one of the big costs in our budget. We do outsource our Medicaid billing through the collaborative, so we do work with that. And, you know, in terms of being more than just pink slips, I think we're probably looking at a scenario right now as we speak tonight of a 20-80 split. We could probably do 20% of the gap we're looking at with new efficiencies, specifically with going to a 3-tier transportation system. But that still leaves 80%, which is about $800,000 that would be personnel.
Again, I don't have any of the answers, so I'm not really, and I'm not even proclaiming to have answers. I'm
Right.
just
I just think it's important to share that when, you know, people talk about, well, what could we do with other districts and can we share services, to say that we are doing a lot of that, because there are efficiencies there.
And it's difficult, it's a difficult proposition to hit when you realize that you're shaving fat and at some point, you're into the muscle. And, you know, and it's an uncomfortable reality to have, and the uncomfortable reality for the district is that our costs are rising at an unbelievable rate, especially given the fact that our revenues don't move. So, I mean, the fact that we're at $2.2 million, you know, above where our revenues are from last year, that's not surprising. We said that was gonna happen, and last year we were 1.5 million, the year before that we were 1.2. And what makes it harder is that we are reaching the accelerating part of the curve, right? Because as you go from, you know, a $27 million payroll and you add a 2% increase on top of that, 2% of 27 million is a lot more than 2% of, let's say, 18 million. And so our costs are accelerating. Like I said, the way that we can get on top of this is number one, through building utilization, but we have to be smart about it, and we have to make sure that we are doing it as part of a long-range reconfiguration plan. Otherwise, we're just gonna be throwing good money after bad. If we start moving stuff from one building to another to try to save a little bit of short-term money, you know, God forbid you have to go back and actually take apart everything that you built. So I want to be measured in how we do that. Unfortunately, we haven't done it, and you know, this year it could have had a significant impact. And the other part that would have had a significant impact is the potential buffer that we could have gotten if we could have used ARPA money for some of the things in our budget, but the ARPA money isn't there.
And I apologize coming in late, and I may have missed this, but what are we looking at in shortfall between what towns have indicated they can support and what the district request is?
So we've heard from Wilbraham, based on their number, we're about 800,000.
If we do the transportation,
Yeah, if we do.
It's a
if we
$1
do
million.
three-tier transportation, about
we
$1
can
million.
save 200,000 through transportation, and we're still left with 800,000.
Yeah, but if you save 200,000 for transportation, you're really only gonna save that year one.
It's okay.
We can
No,
only make
no.
one budget at a
No,
time.
no, I get it, I get it, but I mean, it's still,
Yeah.
it's not really a solution to the ongoing.
But we have been asking them to focus on this
No,
budget and
no.
not long-term budgets.
So what does that reflect in terms of the Wilbraham contribution,
Um,
round figures?
80% of that, so 640.
640. And
So we are meeting with the select board after we leave here, to have a more discussion around our budget. Right now, we have $1 million in there as a placeholder.
does that mean that you, and I understand that you are speaking not for the finance committee, that I'm assuming the finance committee hasn't voted this issue.
Yep.
Is that a number that you think the finance committee would support?
I think they'd support $1 million. I'm not sure how much beyond that. I mean, I'd be very surprised to see it go north of 1.2 or 1.3. I'd be very surprised by that.
But if-
The other half, the factor we have to figure in there is, the district, I think, is in need of $360,000 of updates for this building.
Oh, yeah, one thing at a
So,
time. here.
I mean,
Let's
it's
deal with-
all the same pot of money.
Well,
and-
it is and it's not.
Well, it is.
Well, that's a separate, well,
But the
that would be a
operating
separate
budget-
article, right?
Separate article, but we only have so, we have to fund it from somewhere.
But they can be dealt with separately, you know, at the town level, which,
Absolutely, but they still have to be funded.
but in terms of the operating budget, you think finance would support $1 million, maybe $1.1 million?
I think
Yeah.
we're hovering around, I mean, the problem with us, I'm sure like you, is that this budget drives all the other things we can fund in town. And so we always sort of try and get this done first, and then sometimes we come back to it later and add it or not. But, well, I don't think I've heard a discussion over 1.3.
No. It's in there right now at $1 million.
Okay.
And I think there's, I think we can, I think that's
So $1
manageable.
million from Wilbraham would be roughly 200,000 from Hamden. So that would bring you 1.2. What would that leave you short?
That's where we are right now.
That's what I was just gonna say,
That's-
800,000,
that's
well,
at
$1 million.
800 with the transportation savings.
800,000.
800,000.
So out of that 800, I don't see Wilbraham coming up with another, you know.
No.
600,000.
$800,000.
No,
$700,000, no.
So even if Wilbraham went up to 1.2, that would push us up to about 250 or so, 240, 250.
No, could we go to 1.2? And I'm speaking really off the cuff here, Ryan, so shut that camera off. But I mean, if we went to 1.2 or 1.3, then we're probably gonna say no to any capital improvements to this building.
Well, then that's another separate issue, but absolutely,
I-
all gonna be dealt with, you know, in this go-around at
Yeah.
town meeting, so. But I think it's fair to say that historically, the towns have put a priority on education. And I know from my involvement that we've always made the education funding a priority, or at least tried to. It may not seem like it from your perspective, but I mean, we know that the towns have done without some other things in order to support the schools. Which has been done willingly, and I'm not saying unwillingly, but, you know, this is the point we're at in this budget is, you know, what are the priorities? What do we have and what do we not have? And, you know, the idea of reducing services, you know, within the district in terms of programmatic services, I don't think is acceptable to anybody.
Well, we're already losing, what did you say, Aaron? We're losing 3.5 FTEs because we're losing the ESSER grants.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah.
In just
So
ESSER
it's not, it
positions.
isn't actually a level service budget. We're actually losing some support because those ESSER grants are going away.
Those
So-
are going away for everything though, that's, ESSER's just going away.
The hard part is that the loss of the ARPA funds, I think, has reverberating effects. Because what the towns would be willing to absorb, or at least in this budget cycle, what the towns would have been willing to absorb in the increased expenses from the school, from the school's perspective, you could have used some of that ARPA funds, maybe not for what you see in the school budget, but for some of the other items in the municipal budgets, like police and fire, et cetera.
That ARPA money could have supplanted other funds that could have been redirected, and instead, a majority of it, I won't throw out a figure, has gone to a single project, or peripheries around a single project, which is a beautiful project, don't get me wrong, but that ARPA money, you know, I look at what Springfield's doing with it, and it's creative, and it's vibrant, and it's robust, and I think ours is pretty singularly focused for a majority of it.
Yes.
And it was not to everyone else.
So the way I see it is that there's a couple of ways that this can spin out. The options that we have as a school committee is we can basically submit the article for the warrant for what we feel we need for the budget, and it's not supported by finance, or will be supported by maybe just a couple of members of finance. Or we begin looking at cutting programming, begin looking at cutting positions, so I mean, those are really the only two options. And we also have to look at the second article, which is the capital improvements to this building. So between the two, you're looking at like a $1.4 million gap. So you had $1 million gap just at the educational level, and then we've got 360,000 roughly.
But do we know what the gap is for the FTE and the programming wise? Because I would think that if we're this far along in the budget, somebody must need to know that, because we're supposed to vote Thursday.
Yeah, well, so
And we've not had any conversation at all about how that program would be impacted.
well, until last week, we actually didn't even know what we were looking at for a gap. So we just found out that we're looking at about $1 million gap. Now, as far as trying to figure out, you know, what you cut, well, I think we're just.
I'm not saying we're gonna say anything's gonna get cut, but I know that all along in these meetings, you know, Mark has kind of shared that, you know, if anything, that they will only be able to give us about $1 million. And that's been a few weeks, not just like last week, like, I wanna say it's been maybe 4 or 5 weeks you've had that same number to us. So, I mean, we should have been looking at what, 800 to $1 million we had to try to offset, so we have that visibility to it. That to me is an exact reason for the purpose of conversation in this meeting, but we have not talked about that. Not the
we talked
programming
about-
side about it.
What are you talking about? We just had a whole meeting about we just had a whole meeting about the budget at the roundtable.
We didn't talk about if there was programs gonna get cut, what that looked like. That never came up at all.
Well, like we've talked about in previous meetings, you can't like go in and start deciding, well, we're gonna cut this program, because you're
I'm
gonna
not saying
create
it was programs, but in the past, we've talked about the potential number of FTEs that would have been impacted.
$1
So that
million,
there's-
20 FTEs safely.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same question I had when we
50,000.
started.
I'm not saying we wanna know who.
What are the
either, do you know what I'm
consequences
saying?
of not getting
I'm giving
support
you the
on the
number.
budget? That's
Right.
what
I
I'm
think
saying.
we started here tonight.
That's-
I
And
thought so, but I wasn't sure.
And so they
Sorry.
brought up basically the transportation piece, which was
Depends on
that
who,
if we
which
go to a
positions,
three-tiered
right?
system,
Para costs a lot less than
that
teacher.
LPVAC might be able to save us a couple $100,000. But that still leaves a huge gap.
Teachers, because
Right.
So Aaron just said
we
20
think
positions.
slip, we have
So
to
that- I mean,
lay
that's-
off a
that's what-
third to pay for the other.
That's not
Only-
the first time either. I mean,
He
we've
said that.
Right.
we've said
Every
30
2
when we were
years
looking
slip.
at a potentially
There's
bigger
a third one
cut.
that's at the potential.
I think,
Potential for
I'm
unemployment.
sorry, I should have multiple.
Sorry,
Sorry.
yeah.
That's me, that's on me. So I'll just say, in earlier meetings, Aaron has said 30, when we were looking at a potentially bigger gap. At this point, we're thinking probably 20. I think when we have the meeting on Thursday, we'll have more specificity around what those would be. You know, not individuals, because as Pete explained at a different meeting, you know, bumping will kick in and who knows where the bouncing ball stops, but you can say which programs you'd be downsizing, what the impacts would likely be.
And I believe you said at the budget roundtable that $1 million, the shortfall that we were looking at was like 20 FTEs.
20 or more, yeah.
To be clear, we're gonna vote the school's budget, I believe, Wednesday night.
Okay.
So Peter or I will be in touch as soon as that happens, let you know.
Let any one of us know.
But we are meeting with the select board tonight to have a more meaningful discussion around this and figure out where. And I will let you know about how we want to proceed exactly with the capital request around this building specifically, not around the other buildings, but. And I think input from you would be valuable. I mean, how do you want to deal with that? I mean, we're not gonna come up with $2 million.
Right.
I'm almost sure of that,
Right.
all right?
Well, but it
So-
may, so that, but like I was saying before, so how do I wanna deal with that? Well, and I have 2 other members of the school committee with me who, you know, will be part of that discussion, and there will be 4 others who will join the discussion on Thursday. Now, remember, we don't have to have this budget finalized and voted until March 24th, all right? So
Okay, so
we
you have
haven't,
another week,
we
you have
haven't
another
dropped
I
it.
thought this was the last week. I
We haven't
apologize.
dropped it, we haven't dropped that date to do that on
Thank you.
March 24th, if we need to, if there's not enough questions behind it. But the question is, how do we wanna do this? Because I can see this scenario playing out a couple of different ways. So the one way is that we find a combination of, you know, increased funding and cuts, all right? And we're able to find harmony between where finance and the board of selectmen are and where the school district is. And we get support at town meeting for that number. It naturally begs the question when we get into the capital projects for this building, which will be on a separate article. The other way I see it is that the numbers don't match and that the school committee goes to the town with a number larger than what finance votes to recommend. And then that could actually, at town meeting, open up a pretty big Pandora's box so that we begin talking about a lot of different things, including what happened to the ARPA funds, how come we used all of that money for one project. And I don't know if people wanna actually, I mean, it's a good discussion to have, but, you know, I don't know if people really are ready for.
I'm not sure that's where you wanna have that discussion.
I'm not, but you know what, hey, you know what, Mark, I don't,
Paper again.
but you know what, Mark, it's not my decision.
No, I know,
Yeah,
I'm
you know,
not saying it is.
and I'm
just
saying that's-
for benefit
I'm
of
saying
this.
that, right, but I'm saying that that's, you know, that's the logical way in which that conversation will take place.
One of the things I did have a discussion, I actually talked to some selectmen and to Nick over the weekend. Perhaps for the capital projects that you have outlined, I think there's 5 of them, you break them out individually. We could potentially, and I know there's a significant amount of support to get that railing changed, all right? And we still could use ARPA funds for that. Even if Hamden doesn't use ARPA funds, Hamden just needs to fund it in a different way.
Right.
But, so it would be helpful to have those numbers broken down by, we need X dollars for this, we need Y dollars for this. Because then we can address it.
But I think that was already done.
I don't
Before they
recall
send you, those are all broken out.
Those are broken out before, I don't
But
recall.
on capital, we haven't looked at it, at the school stuff yet, on
Okay.
capital,
At
so
the
maybe it's
Bottom
broken.
of page 2 is the capital piece, and you've got a matrix that shows
I didn't get the
Wilbraham
PowerPoint.
share, Hamden share.
I didn't get a copy of that.
No, it's on the assessment worksheet, the colored sheet, it's actually on the colored sheet.
Oh,
It shows-
okay.
Yeah.
It shows
Okay,
Wilbraham,
all right,
Hamden
all right,
share.
good,
It's on
all right.
bottom of
I
page
have
2.
that, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, it breaks out all those things.
I can make it abundantly clear though to whoever.
Are you coming to, are you scheduled to, do you normally, this is my first year in capital, do you normally come before capital, or do you just
Yes,
submit
well,
it?
So for capital, last year when I came to capital, I was prepared to talk about all of the elementary and middle schools and then the high school. When I started talking about Minichog, they said, oh no, we don't do that here. That's not, you need to go wherever else. That got into that whole discussion
Because of
about
the-
where does Minichog capital go, right? So that's why I've added that section to the assessment worksheet so that it's crystal clear to everyone who gets that whenever they get it. These are the Minichog pieces, you know, here's the other pieces.
Mark, will you send that picture?
So, I think we have our meeting set on Thursday. We'll get a finance committee vote before Thursday.
Yes.
So we will basically be discussing at our meeting among the full committee, you know, where we wanna go, and that's gonna give, cause that's too big of a piece of steak for any one of us to chew. So we need to involve the full committee on that and find out where the full committee stands on whether we want to, you know, to accept what the finance committee is giving us, or if we want to go to the town meeting with something higher, yes. Sean?
So, to harken back to what you were talking about before, about maybe redundancies that we could use the towns for that are happening in the district, is that something that we should maybe have, I don't know if this subcommittee is the forum, but to have the DPW of both towns sit down?
I think that's
here?
gotta be first a BOS discussion. I think the committee needs to,
Oh, you brought it up here.
I
But
did.
You
I
said
just-
that we need to do
I
that,
just-
so that's
I
why.
brought up the redundancy. and
Yeah, so that's why I thought that.
I think it's worth, whatever the mechanism is, even as it would pan out,
Right.
I think it's worth.
We're willing to have those
Go to town
conversations,
and
any of
say,
those conversations,
We've had 'em,
but,
it's not.
but throwing it at the last minute here of saying like,
not
hey,
gonna
why aren't
solve
you
this.
doing
No,
this?
it's not, I
Yeah.
think I said that, I
You
think I
know.
said it, it's not gonna solve
It's
this
not
year,
gonna
but I think it's
solve
something
this
we
year.
need to dig into those things.
I have no
We
problem
need
with
to
that.
change the way we're doing business.
Yeah, yes, we do.
And I think the other piece of it is just to jump out of that, I don't think the general, I mean, I know hopefully they're all watching at home, it's 100%. I think about 3% of the town pays attention, you know, to town matters, and to be able to say, and if the 3% out there is mad at me, you know, I'll give my email address later, but to say and I know how hard you work for nothing on the school committee, I know how many nights you're out, but to say we've turned over every stone, we looked at that, and in 2023, we looked at merging maintenance or payroll, and it just doesn't work, or it did work and we did it. When people pay attention, I mean, the last real issue where I thought people in town, the majority actually paid attention was the vote for this building, and that was 10 years ago. And that was the only time I've seen that.
The lights, that's the only time people get concerned.
I take it back. I stand corrected.
And that's only because it made Saturday Night Live, so maybe the conversation needs to make Saturday Night Live.
So Sean, you had another question?
Sorry.
No, it's good, like, I think that when I first came on the committee 7 years ago, there was a thing with the finance director that he always asked for more, he got less, he threatened to have everyone, you know, all these people would get, you know, laid off and pink slips would be sent out, and then no pink slips were sent out. And then, you know, and then when we started getting into more of like, this is the budget in honesty, openness, transparency, having you come to the meeting, be part of all of our conversations, I think that the thought process needs to change a little bit with everyone, that when we're presenting the budget, we're not presenting something that fat and you guys can come up to us a million less and nothing will have to change because we've padded this and padded that. There is no padding. We have gone transparent and open and honest with the budget, and the work that Aaron does is frankly mind-blowing for me when you know anything about the budget. So I would just recommend that we all just open up to that, you know, we're not, if they were hundreds of thousands of dollars here and there to shave, they would be cold.
We have to come up with a budget.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
We are gonna come up with a budget.
yeah, oh yeah.
So, Maura, you weren't here, but I said we would finish up at 20 of so that you guys could get over
Sorry
to the
about
Board of Selectmen. No, that's fine, that's fine. Just running through quickly, any more discussion about that?
Just one thing,
Yeah, Chuck.
I do think it's valuable for us to look at any places where we can have efficiencies, but I don't think it satisfies the wish you put out of not having layoffs or pink slips, because if you're talking about merging departments, the question is whether we lay off some school employees and have town people work here, or whether we lay off some town employees and have school people work there. But the way you get the savings is still by reducing staff. I mean, there might be some cooperative purchasing that might be able to save a few dollars here and there, but the money we're talking about is personnel.
I guess with my frustration, and maybe I was too strong in it, my frustration isn't necessarily around layoffs. My frustration is that we keep lessening the program. And, I mean, it's all, you know, we've heard so many times, it's all about the kids.
Yeah.
The kids bear the brunt of it every year.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's about the programming. I mean, if we could combine things and become more efficient and refunnel those dollars into programming,
I guess I
Sorry.
don't understand how you think that the programming is reduced, because we just added classes through the, what's that called, the,
Program studies.
yeah.
But that's not, but that, you're not adding faculty, you're not adding.
No, but I mean,
FTEs.
but we're adding we're adding additional opportunities,
I-
so.
But you're
it's
also-
not-
Yeah, but
Reducing.
you're also taking away some programming too, right? So,
I would
you know,
argue, in the last 10 years, we've had a significant change in programming. And
Oh,
I'm
I
not
don't-
thinking,
I don't disagree with that.
and every year, it's not huge entirely, but cumulatively, over the last decade, it's been
Oh.
notable what
So
we've
I
offered
can-
them.
agree with
So when,
so I can hear your frustration, Mark, and I would say that if I could use a metaphor, it would be like going to the casino and trying to gamble wearing a blindfold and earmuffs. All right, if you can't see and you can't hear, you're not going to be able to gamble as effectively. The reason why you're frustrated is the same reason why I'm frustrated every year doing this. And the main issue is that our mandated cost increases outstrip any increases that we get from the state. Literally, like, every year we face a $1.5 to $2 million deficit. So it has, I mean, and we can, like, there are ways that we can find ways to tighten efficiencies, but if you're literally falling $1.5 million short every single year and you're trying to make that up with efficiencies, again, if you extrapolate that out far enough, you know what happens? Is that we end up spending all of our money on education, but nobody actually works for the district.
But we can't control that. But we need to focus on what we can control, and I agree with you. I'm not disagreeing with you, and I'm not saying we're gonna solve everything, but we need to get creative and control what we can control. And we need to focus on that.
And I think we've done I think the school committee could have done a much better job with regards to facilities, and I've said it for several years. Facilities is the #1 way that we can
Building
increase our
utilization is
efficiencies.
huge.
Yep, it's the #1 way. However, you know, again, you know, it's gonna save you a big chunk up front, and, you know, it'll be something that will be diminishing returns moving ahead. But again, you know, you can have a huge jump on this, and you could say, let's say you could save $1 million, and you'd be like, great, we completely covered this. And the next year, you're still gonna have another 1.5 million short
We're
because
so far behind now.
yeah. So I understand the sentiment behind it, believe me, and I think everybody does.
Oh, yeah.
At the same time, you know, there are ways that we could save money. Certainly, the building utilization is one. We're not gonna do it this year,
I
but
wouldn't say that would be $1 million, dollars.
Oh,
building
I think
utilization,
it could be well north of $1 million.
I don't know that it would, and is it actually savings or is it just reallocation of funds?
It's,
it's
yeah.
the same
Well,
thing.
no,
But it's
well,
not, you can't say it's a
Great
savings
point.
if you're just gonna move the money around.
But it,
No, but you're
Well,
moving it from facilities into education.
education.
Right.
So while it may
So
not be a
That's, again,
taxpayer,
reallocating, that's not saving, I'm sorry.
it's
that's
not a
savings.
taxpayer savings. And
Taxpayer
you
savings.
shouldn't portray it that way.
Right.
But what it is, you're gonna improve education, you're gonna have better test scores, kids are gonna learn more, they're gonna get to
So
better
your budget-
schools.
Right, so your budget bottom line doesn't change, but you're
Shouldn't change.
reallocating resources, so rather than pulling that money out of increased assessments for
So-
the future, you're reallocating that money in the budget.
So
Right,
your
so you
point-
just have to be careful about calling it a savings so much as
Yeah.
it's.
So to your
it's a-
point, Maura, that's a very
budget
valid point,
adjustment.
because it's not savings to the taxpayer.
No, it's
Right.
more of
But
avoidance,
it's-
but,
It's,
Yeah.
it's much better
No, it's
utilization of their funds.
And let's just make it clear from everyone on the school committee to y'all that we do appreciate you doing the hard work with us. We do appreciate the towns and how they've really stepped up in this year after year after year of the state just, coming up short.
And I think part of the reason we came up with $1 million for this year was I think it fits within the budget, and it's also about 20% more than we typically give you. We normally give you about $850
Right.
increase, and this year we.
Well, and remember-
It's kind of the justification.
Well, and remember, right, so when we look at the
Yeah.
percent increases per year, right, we're always hovered around that 2, 2.25, right? But again, every single year, remember that, 2% of a larger number is a larger number.
Yeah.
So, 2%, 15 years ago, when it was a $40 million budget, is certainly a lot different now when it's 53. So, yeah, I know you guys have to go, so, any more questions on that? We will meet again, I think we should meet again next Monday. Sean?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Maura?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Sorry, meet again next Monday?
It should be okay.
Okay.
Do you want a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Or is that too soon?
Nope, you do a motion to adjourn?
I don't know what time.
Second.
Second, okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Sorry.
Thank you guys, fellas.
Ryan is here,
So
Ryan
the
is
reason
trying.
I wanted to
guys
ask-
Doesn't even have this article.
He's driving my name right now.
And,
Open it up, is it a meeting?
Permit?